Good morning, everyone. We'll start in just about 30 seconds. All right, ladies, shall we go? So good morning, everyone. I'm Darcy Winslow, president of the Academy for Systems Change, and welcome to our webinar with Meg Wheatley. I'm so excited that she has agreed to partner with us on this. I'd like to do just a quick introduction of the Academy before we get started, let you know a little bit about that, and welcome to all the Academy fellows and faculty that I see on the list. But the Academy, we exist to build a community among emerging and existing leaders who are really at the pioneering edge of the systems change work, and many working in such critical domains. And our approach fosters deep understanding of the most powerful connections between personal mastery and how we shift the systems within which we all live and work. And our goal is really to empower systems change leaders, their organizations and communities to solve ecological, economic, and environmental challenges in a way that produces very lasting change. So that's the essence of what we do. And I'd like to introduce Kim Keita, who is one of our fellows in our first cohort. She is in Fort Collins, Colorado, at Colorado State University. She's currently the Director of Activities in Todos Santos as part of Colorado State University. She led very successfully the creation of the campus in Todos Santos as part of a U.S.-Mexico partnership. And I had the honor of being one of Kim's coaches, and she has just been an amazing partner in this work. So Kim, over to you to set up how this webinar will go.
Thank you, Darcy, and welcome everyone on the call. I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about the flow of the webinar and some of the logistics. So just to let you know that we are recording this and we will share the recording with you in a few days. So as we get started, if you have any technical questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. You'll see that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Sarah from the Academy for Systems Change will be working with us in the background to answer those questions. We have all of your videos and audio muted, so you'll want to rely on this Q&A box for the technical questions and for content questions later on. So Meg will be speaking this morning for about 20 minutes. She requests that we all listen with our full attention. One of the benefits of the webinar being recorded is that we can just relax. We don't have to worry. We can not worry about taking notes, just kind of sit back and bring our full attention to what she's saying. And then when Meg concludes her talk, we will all be invited to type questions into that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And Darcy and I will begin selecting questions that we will pose to Meg for her to answer for us. So we're very excited to have Meg with us. And back to you, Darcy.
Great. Well, Meg. I first found out who Meg was back in the early 1990s when she came out with her book, Leadership in the New Science. I think it was in 1992. And I was still working at Nike, and I can remember calling Meg out of the blue. And wondering if she would speak to a group of women at Nike. So that's how I first got to know Meg. But as I've gotten to know her and her work, the extent is quite amazing who she's worked with over the years, with business leaders and corporations, with Aboriginal leaders, certainly with women, government, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. She's done lots of work with the national parks. But her work today is really focused on working with warriors for the human spirit. And I'm sure she'll share a bit of that with you all. But she is just a prolific writer, a poet, a speaker. Her books are not just insightful, they're absolutely beautiful. And I have many, many of those. Some of her other books are Perseverance, Walk Out, Walk On, and certainly the one that will be more of the focus today, Who Do We Choose to Be? About 4 or 5 years ago, Meg and I were asked to co-facilitate a workshop in Quito, Ecuador. And I think that's what really started to seal the deal and how we might work together more closely. And so we have been over the years, and we now have a deep, deep connection to one of our favorite places on the planet, Crestone, Colorado. And both of us doing a lot of our spiritual work there. But I'd like to share one of my favorite quotes from Meg that I think really epitomizes this workshop. But she says, "Very great change starts from very small conversations held among people who care." So thank you all for caring and for showing up today. And Meg, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Darcy, and I want to say hello to everyone. I'm really delighted that we have some time together today. My role now is to present a clear understanding of what's happening so that we can intelligently answer the question of who do we choose to be. And in order to really hear, take in, listen to what I'm saying, I really want you not to take notes, because if you're taking notes, you will just be noticing things you already are familiar with, and you won't listen to the rest of what I'm saying. And the other aspect of this is that I really don't want you to even think of questions until you hear the whole presentation. At the end of the presentation, about 20 minutes or so, I will ask you to contemplate for a few minutes. So you can already see this is going to be different than most other presentations, because I think answering the question, who do we choose to be, is an absolutely essential and also existential question at this point. You have answered it by being a part of the Academy. You've already declared that you want to be of use, you want to know how to create successful, enduring change, you want to know how to make a contribution to this time. My own work now with Warriors for the Human Spirit, which I will talk about more at the end, is in response to the understanding that we cannot change this world. We cannot change it at the level, at the global level, which it so direly needs changing. I have been an activist and a systems thinker, change agent my entire career, which now is coming up on 47 years. That's a bit of a shock for me. But what I am very clear about is that for all of our many, many years of dedicated effort, quite brilliant work in many cases, work that use systems thinking, work that engaged leaders, work that used participative processes, work that had a global vision attached to it, how do we go to scale? All of that work, which was done well, has not impacted sufficiently the world we are now facing. And so the question for me, and Darcy and I talked about this earlier, is what is the role of systems thinking in a world where systems have emerged? And these global emergent systems, if you know anything about emergence, its main property, which is really difficult to deal with if you're a change agent, is once it's emerged, you can't work backwards. You can't fix elements of it. So you can't fix a culture of violence and bullying in schools by just teaching children to be better at listening to one another or not use aggressive actions. You can't change a system of poverty by just asking people to pay attention to the numbers of people who are suffering at this time, especially increasingly in the developed countries where homelessness is a growing problem. The bad news about living systems theory is that living systems change through emergence. And once the system has emerged, it exhibits power and domination over the elements that contributed to its emergence, but it changes those that have emerged, and it also has properties that nobody likes, no one could foresee. You can see this right now. I don't want to talk about this right now, but I'm really intrigued by what's happened with Google and Facebook. That is a good example of a system that has emerged that nobody expected. It was based on different values, and now we don't know what to do with it because you cannot work backwards. If you're interested in this, it's in my most recent book and the book I wrote in 2012, So Far From Home. So here we are as people dedicated to changing the world. And what do we do now? What do we do with our skills and capacities that we've already developed? And what I was really pleased about in looking through the Academy descriptions is, for me, the real work is inner work because of the outer realities we face. I want to read to you what Gandhi described in 1924 as the 7 social sins that were facing the world nearly 100 years ago. And he pulled this out and wrote them down on a piece of paper just days before he was assassinated in 1947 to give to his grandson. So I really think this is his legacy. And he wrote the 7 social skills. The first one, just listen. I hope you're not taking notes. First one is politics without principle. Second is wealth without work. The third is commerce without morality. The fourth is pleasure without conscience. Fifth, education without character. 6, science without humanity. And number 7 is worship without sacrifice. I think this is the most perfect description of what we're facing, because we are lacking now as a world civilization. We are lacking attention to ethics, morality, social justice issues, equality issues, all of these things that are so important to us, ecological issues, our relationship with the planet, all of these issues that we are so willingly to engage with as systems thinkers, as people who know we need change. We're not working in a context where there is enough shared value, such as ethics, decency, collectivism, thinking about the whole, all the things that we treasure. If you're a good systems thinker, you think about interconnectedness, you think about connections, you think about having influence in one small place that hopefully can ripple out or cascade out or blaze out to affect the whole. But we no longer have the conditions. This is my own take on systems analysis these days. We no longer have the conditions to affect the changes that need to be changed. The things that need to be changed are so clear. Every day there's more and more evidence of we're engaged in commerce without morality, character without education, wealth without any sense of commitment to the whole, and politics without principle. That's our current reality. So as a systems thinker, I feel it's very important to encourage all of us to notice these dynamics, because when you're doing a systems analysis, you have to look at how the different dynamics actually combine, vector in to create what we would now call this I would call it life-destroying time, where the causes, the people, the planet that we so care about are no longer part of the decision-making equations. So I have worked for years with the definition of leadership as life-affirming or life-destroying. What are we doing with human potential, with creativity, with people's desire to innovate, people's desire to contribute? What's happening with all of those things? That's what many of us, myself is right there, we're working on for 40 years. How do you bring out the best of human potential in organizational and social settings. But now we have to factor into that these dynamics that Gandhi spoke so clearly about. We're in a post-truth lying world. We're in a world where there are different versions of reality that people adamantly, violently hold on to. We're in the world of echo chambers where people only get the information they want. And that information validates their original belief system, and it just increases the intensity of their grasping onto these beliefs and leads to conspiracy theories, leads to violent exchanges, leads to harassment, bullying, terrorizing one another with social media messages. This is the world which we have to open our eyes to if we are still to make a contribution there. And so that's the macro level of systems thinking. We really need to understand what's going on that we have no control over. We have no control over these dynamics, and they have emerged. I think I want to give you my favorite example of why emergent systems can't be changed, and it's the chocolate chip cookie. So if you take all the ingredients of a chocolate chip cookie, the flour, the sugar, the butter or oil, the eggs, the chocolate chips, the vanilla flavoring if you want, the rising element, you look at them all when they're sitting on a counter, nothing in that can predict what a chocolate chip cookie tastes like. So it's how the elements come together that creates this emergent property called a chocolate chip cookie. Now, what if it didn't work out well? You're sitting there with a cookie and you realize, oh, I forgot to put the salt in. What do? Do you sprinkle salt on top? Or you say, this has too much baking powder. It really doesn't have a good taste. What can you do? Can you extract that? No. So this is applicable at all levels of scale. Once a system has emerged, we cannot change it by working backwards, by trying to change the individual parts. Our only intelligent response is to recognize this is emergent and to create new, to start over. And that's where I'm taking all of my work these days, which is to local efforts. Forget about scale, forget about creating something that really works so well that everyone will just love you for creating it and will just eagerly take it on and change the way they operate. That was my belief for many years. I thought good work, good ideas, evidence-based good work gets rewarded by going to scale, by being accepted. But that's not the only dynamic here. Intelligence and rationality are very difficult to find in this world. And I think one of the things I can say from my own direct experience is that good ideas, backed up by comprehensive evidence, do not create change if the leader, if the society, if the politics don't want to change. And I feel very strongly that one of the things we all need to encounter in our work, in your projects, is to really think, how can I keep this well-designed and well-bounded as what I call an island of sanity? To actually not even worry about things like scale, viability at a larger level, but instead to focus our efforts on how can I be the most sane expression of leadership in what I'm doing. Now, I define a sane leader as one who has unshakable confidence in who people are, that people can be kind, generous, creative. But the operative phrase there is can be, and this is where you and I come in. How do we create the conditions within your projects, your field projects, within what I'm calling islands of sanity? How do we create the conditions for people's best qualities to arise, their generosity, their creativity, their kindness? One of my friends who's worked quite a lot with refugees has said that every human being in the world wants to learn so they can contribute. They want to earn their way so they're not accepting welfare or handouts. They really want to make a contribution, and they want to be together. They want to be in community. And I think if we could just work with those three dynamics and really trust that they're part of the human experience. We find them in everyone, even in the worst conditions. People want to earn, learn, and be together. When I think of an island of sanity, what I'm really using quite deliberately this image of an island where people feel a sense of protection, where people are protected from these terrible dynamics of hate and polarization and greed and narcissism, all the things that are destroying our ability to work well together, all the competition, the ruthless competition, all the anger that people just erupt quickly into anger. People are involved in self-preservation. Of course, I could do a chart that would be so easily clear that the more fear people feel about what's going on in the world, the greater the uncertainty that we're all experiencing, the greater their polarization. They're feeling they have to withdraw from others, from immigrants, from strangers, from people of different faiths and cultures. And so the level of fear, which is, I think, being deliberately inculcated by leaders in many places, although they don't have to do much work these days, there's enough to be afraid of. Such big things out of our control as climate change, floods, droughts, tornadoes, typhoons, hurricanes, volcano eruptions. There's enough to be afraid of just from the perspective of how the planet is pushing back. But then people are withdrawing. I found it very difficult these days to engage people in a meaningful conversation if we don't first address the extreme polarization. We call it othering in the US, which I hope is not part of your vocabulary if you're from another place. But on an island of sanity, what we do is we create the conditions for people to remember what it means, what it feels like to work well together, to work in a trusting environment, to work in a place where I'm not going to be criticized for the least mistake, where real learning therefore can happen because we're all in this together and we're learning together, and mistakes are not seen as an issue at all. And an island of sanity is both a way to lead, but I also want to now talk about your role. And of course, you can read a lot about this on my website in articles and in this new book, Who Do We Choose to Be? The subtitles of the book are The Path, and I'm just briefly giving you a taste of that. The first subtitle is We Have to Face Reality. We have to face what's going on. I introduced Gandhi's 7 social sins, but there's much worse information out there that it is quite overwhelmingly depressing when you first encounter it. Without doubt, if you're a sensitive, compassionate person, you're horrified by what's going on in different places in the world. You can be horrified by what's going on in your neighborhood. The second subtitle is Claiming Leadership, and this is where I want to encourage all of us to answer the question of who do we choose to be by claiming a different quality of leadership. I'll talk more about that in a moment. The third subtitle is Restoring Sanity, where we can. That's why I'm still using this title, Islands of Sanity. Creating places using Teddy Roosevelt had a wonderful piece of advice for the United States as president. In the 1920s, he said, do what you can where you are with what you have. Now just contrast that to our typical normal approach to change, which is we have to develop a prototype, we have to develop a model, and then it has to go to scale, and we need funding for that, and we need publicity, we need respect, etc. And he's saying, no, do what you can where you are with what you have right now. And I would just add to that with the people in front of you, with the people you are already working with. And if you, as a leader of whether it's a project or a formal leader, can really act with the confidence that the people you are working with can be creative and generous and kind, and that it's up to you and other leaders to create the conditions where people are not withdrawing in fear, they're not overwhelmed with aggression and conflict. I call this role a warrior for the human spirit, and I've deliberately chose the word warrior against many pushbacks of people saying, well, that's about war, that's about aggression. It doesn't have to be. The warriors always arise when the people need protection. And in this day and age, the human spirit needs protection. People are disrespected, ignored, they're just made into numbers. I think it's already been completed, a great dehumanization of the workplace, except for special organizations where there's really a sane leader. And we can all be that. Whatever our domain of influence, we can be the presence of sanity. We can be the presence of generosity and kindness and bravery ourselves. And to do that in the midst of these very difficult dynamics, we have to do the inner work that is part of the Academy's program. It's part of the Warriors for the Human Spirit training. We need to trust ourselves, not to get angry, not to get triggered, not to get aggressive. And in fact, in our training, we work very hard not to add to the aggression and fear of this time. And of course, we feel fear, and I feel aggression pretty frequently still, but I don't act on it. And I don't act on it because I've trained my mind to be able to watch myself in difficult situations. So the kind of work that you're doing on the inner dimensions for me is absolutely critical to make any contribution that is of true value. And I am minimizing as well as elevating our contribution by calling us warriors for the human spirit. Who else is going to defend people? Who else is going to keep in mind that people are suffering and certain policies and decisions and practices create more harm for people? That's what a warrior for the human spirit does. We're also there to just be a presence of peacefulness and groundedness, people who aren't easily triggered. And we're finding that very attractive to other people. So in our own way of being present in difficult situations, and I hope you've discovered this already, but how we can be present for other people and not add to the fear and aggression of this time is a major contribution, because then it encourages other people to step forward, not with their aggression, not with their demands, not with their entitlements, but with this more fundamental human desire to contribute and to be in good relationships. More and more, I feel that we are the keepers of a faith in human beings, in what human beings are capable of. Our society is pushing us towards selfishness and greed and overwhelming narcissism, as well as immorality. But we, by our own training and by our own commitment in how we do the work and how you do your work, we can be a reminder of what is the best in human nature and what are the qualities of true leadership. I'm going to stop here, and I would like you to just contemplate for 2 minutes, which is barely any time at all, although sometimes it feels like a major commitment. For 2 minutes, I would just like you to just sit back, please. I hope you haven't been taking notes, but I don't know how trustworthy you are or not. But just notice what you are noticing in what I said. Notice what got your attention, because that will tell you a lot more about your own mind and what you're interested in and how you think. So please let's spend 2 minutes of absolute quiet in contemplating what just got my attention. What am I noticing about what makes that? And after that, feel free to write in your questions. So we'll just take 2 minutes and I will time it for us. Thank you. I wonder how it felt for you to just take some time to just stop and contemplate. So now we will happily receive your questions.
So once again, everyone, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to type in your questions. Kim and I will then serve those up to Meg.
I would also be interested in your responses as well. What got your attention?
So Meg, while these are coming in, they're starting to come in now. For those who are mired in what's already emerged, I love the chocolate chip cookie analogy. It's so clear. What would you suggest they do? And in terms of what that brought up for me, I found myself going back and forth between the dark and the light, the dark and the light. And
Yeah.
so.
Well, it is a dance between the dark and the light. No doubt about that. When you face reality, what you take in, if you're really brave enough to face reality and get past the denial, the false hopes, so many of our beliefs really paralyze us. And so to just sit with what's happening just in your area of the world is usually quite overwhelming. But what I'm finding is once you stop putting the energy into denial or false hopefulness, you realize, oh, there's work to do. It's just more focused. It's just more it's like bringing all of our ambition and vision and desire to serve down to here. What is the word? And you're already doing this in the Academy. But I think what I'd like to encourage everyone is, as you're focused on your individual, are they called field projects?
We call them practice fields.
Practice fields.
Mm-hmm.
As you're doing that, realize that you are going local. You have the possibility to really do this well if you create enough of an island mentality where you're not interested in influencing. I mean this quite sincerely. You're no longer interested in affecting change at a macro level. You're focused on the micro level. And the more you do local work, the more meaning your work has. And that's a great antidote to the despair that one has to feel when you take in what's happening to the planet, what's happening to whole populations of people. So it's, what do we do with our energy? And for me, I go through periods of despair several times a week. It used to be several times a day. And every time I use it as motivation to, well, now I know what to do. Now I know where I want to contribute. And it works. I mean, in the trainings that we do, and if you're interested in those trainings, just go on my website, margaretwheatley.com. It's right there in your face when the home screen opens. We're finding another form of motivation, another way to really feel we're making a contribution, but it's not at this global change activist movement level. It's really quite local, and I just think everyone here has that opportunity if they're engaged with you in the Academy.
Great. We've got several questions now, and you already answered the very first one. People wanted more information around your trainings. So I'll just maybe pose a few questions, 3 questions maybe, and then let you respond to that.
Sure.
Okay, the first one, you just talked about it a little bit. What's it like for you when you feel aggression, yet you don't act on it? The second one...
I can answer that. It feels wonderful. It feels freeing and liberating. Really wonderful not to have to push back.
Great. Another one that got people's attention, that scale is not it. It's about how you show up. How do I step into my role and live out what I can bring? Trust yourself, emergent systems. Chocolate chip is going to be a theme.
Yeah.
Another one related, are you suggesting that emergent systems cannot truly be changed, but rather only that new systems can be created?
Yes.
That was a big one for me.
I can speak to this little collection, right?
Yes.
I remember the day, it was when I was getting ready to write my second book, A Simpler Way, and I was walking with my co-author, Myron Rogers, and we suddenly understood that emergent systems cannot be changed. And we just stopped in our walk and looked at each other and went, oh my God. But you have the evidence now, and it's so clearly in the science. And it's the fundamental root of system thinking, to notice when a system has emerged. So it is about starting over. I think that's kind of good news. And it's about starting over locally. But what we need to let go of is our ambition that if we do something well at a small level of scale, that it will influence the larger system, which is really stuck. It cannot be influenced. So I encounter a lot of pushback when people say, well, I know of all these great projects. I know, there's thousands, maybe there's millions of people who are doing education right. They're doing local finance right. They're doing social justice. All the issues we care about are being done locally, and people want that to be evidence that we're going to change the larger system. my own perspective on that is I've written a book about those great innovative communities called Walk Out, Walk On. Don't be deceived that this means we're going to change the whole system. We are creating wonderful pockets of possibility, islands of sanity, and that is meaningful enough, and that's good work.
So we have a couple other questions continuing on these themes. So one is, what got my attention is emergence and the fact that it is futile to fight the system by being within the system. In the world of anarchy, how to keep my belief that what I am doing will create an impact, even though I create an island when there is chaos outside of my bubble or my island.
Yes. Well, I'm not preaching anarchy, although the original anarchists were actually based on the same humane values as most of us. We are working within the system. I'm working within the system. All the people I train as warriors are working within the system. There is, in the Shambhala warrior prophecy that Joanna Macy made famous, the clarity that at this time, when all of life hangs by the frailest of threads, when weapons of mass destruction are here and great powers threaten one another. This was written probably, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, or even speaks of an even earlier era. At that time, the Shambhala warriors will come forward, and they only have the weapons of compassion and insight, but they are inside the halls of power and they understand them. This is what it felt gave great meaning to my experience of, and I want you to check it with you. You know how these systems work. We know how they work. And therefore, we don't get caught in these false beliefs or these ambitions that we're going to be able to change them. I mean, that's the second stage of knowing how they work. This takes some personal work, some contemplative experiences to really know the system and realize I cannot change the whole of it. But within a large system, you can create, I mean, I know of these, you can create great pockets of possibility or islands of sanity. You can create, but it takes a lot of work. It takes good leadership and understanding that part of your job is to keep these very destructive forces at bay as much as you can. I work with these leaders. It is exhausting work, but it's very meaningful work. And that it's real warriorship. So
there's
we have to stay in the systems and do what we can there with what we have, where we are. And then we also don't become blind fools and just keep persevering when in fact there's no hope of change. So there is a time when you have to assess whether you've done your best and now you have to leave.
So a couple other questions came up on that topic. So Island of Sanity is a wonderful concept that resonated with me. How do we hold the island but keep it open for others who are seeking this perspective, but they're at different stages of letting go and allowing a new way to unfold?
Yeah, so what is our immigration authority here? I think this is just personal discernment. You don't open the doors to everyone. So you do have a sense of your own condition of readiness, a condition of people who, if they were in a strong culture, because this is our history with strong cultures and organizations, change individuals who come into it. They influence the newcomers. So if you have a strong culture, you can be assured that new people, even if they're not up to speed, and I wouldn't want to get into that evaluation either, but if you pay attention to the culture itself and the clarity of people who are already there, you will find that you can welcome in many more people, and then they'll get it. more quickly, But you don't want to let everyone in because that's what happens. Then it dissipates and there's no culture to hold it.
Yes, so the questions just keep coming in. These are great. One from my old buddy, Dana Baumeister. Hello, Dana. Since systems emerge from the habitat conditions, and Dana's with biomimicry, since they emerge from habitat conditions in which they arose, it seems there is an opportunity to work with the conditions or the context to bring about a new emergent system.
Well, that is the work.
Yeah.
But it will be different then.
Right.
Then you're not trying to change the existing emergent system, but absolutely. I mean, this is many leaders now that I know of, which is still a great minority, but they're working intentionally with the values that you set in place. And then you check constantly, are we living our values? I mean, we know how to do this work. Some of us know how to do this work well, and there's lots of experiences out there. But the new way of thinking about this, I just want to say it for the last time, is we are set on creating the new. Mm-hmm. And that is a known process, both from habitat conditions, and you take that to a human organization condition, and you're really focused on creating the culture, a new culture that can give rise to the behaviors that you know are essential and that support and nourish people.
There's another one, and this is related to something I know you and I, Meg, have talked about how we start to change the narrative by telling these, seemingly insignificant stories of success, the small islands of sanity. So the question is, islands of sanity, whoops, things just changed, sound like, quote, Christians in the catacombs. So what is the myth or narrative that turns thinking into a popular religion?
I don't want to go there because I don't think that way. I'm not trying to create a popular religion because you know what happens to them. People become fanatical and start arguing or fighting with those who disagree with them. So I'm not interested in that. But I will say that I've studied a lot of cosmologies in the past year deliberately, wanting to understand what is the human experience, how do we make sense of life. And what I found is that cultures that felt threatened, so primary example is the Incan culture in Peru, when they had a clear prophecy that the Spanish conquistadores were coming, and they knew the time and they knew the circumstances. And they took their sacred knowledge up to 17,000 feet to preserve it. In the Aztec culture, which in and of itself was very violent at the end, but the reason they could preserve their sacred knowledge was because each village had its own text. So it was true dispersal. This is true in most cultures. In Tibet, the ancient wisdom was preserved in a highly mystical fashion to come forth when it was needed. I think this is just something we need to look at now. And I've been in this conversation with Joanna Macy is how are we going to preserve what we know for future times? And I recently have said to the people in warrior training, we need to think of ourselves as not seeds for the future, but preserving a whole root system. Mm-hmm. And I use the analogy, the imagery of the aspen trees who have a vast root system that can last for 100 years when the outer environment has been destroyed by fire or flood or avalanche. And only when conditions are ready for them, they spring up as new trees. The oldest aspen tree colony is in Utah here, and it's 80,000 years old because the root system has preserved that long. Some people push it back to 1 million years. So one thing is about thinking, because I run into this a lot, people use the analogy of we're planting trees that we will never sit under. We will, or we'll just plant seeds for the future. But I am really taken now with that our work is to create know our root system, know our values, know our unshakable confidence in what people are capable of, but often don't exhibit to us, and that we're preserving that knowledge for the next round when it will be more appreciated. And that means we have to get our act together. That means we really have to have unconditional confidence in forms of leadership, in our faith in people and in the human spirit. We really have to be faithful to people, our understanding and our experience, because it's going to get tougher and tougher in the next several years. So what is our root system? And how do we act to both embody that in this present chaotic, turbulent, destructive climate? And how do we also embody it so that it remains as a strong root system for the future? But I don't know how far off that future is either.
Yeah, maybe one last question. I want to go back to, and I'm throwing this one in because I'd love to hear your response. You talk about, your study with the Shambhala warriors and Shambhala work and their weapons. We brought that analogy into Nike at one time, and you can imagine how that landed within that culture. But we talked about these leaders who were signing up for this work to tap into weapons of fearlessness and gentleness, and how those people actually began to create a genealogy of influence over time, whether they stayed at Nike or they went beyond. And so my question to you is, how has your personal practice of cultivation, compassion, empathy, mindfulness, meditation, how has that changed over time? How has that influenced your work? How has that influenced who you are?
That is the easiest question for me to answer. I wouldn't be doing this work or feeling so joyful in finding my right work if I hadn't learned how to watch my mind, overcome my triggers, learn what presence feels like, learn what true insight feels like. It's not coming from me. And then I have a long history of meditation retreats, long retreats. But I'm finding in the Warrior Program, because we do put emphasis on training our minds as well as training our capacities as leaders, that we're finding a great success. So the program, we're finding great success in people really being able to stay present in a meeting and not go crazy, or really being able to see more clearly because their perception isn't clouded by their own filters, which of course is always there unless we train to see them, and we train to actually move from a position of what do I need to what can I offer. And that's fundamental. It's been fundamental in my life. And I'm now in a place where I really trust myself. I really trust myself not to be all the time peaceful, gentle, and kind, but to notice instantly when I start to get angry and aggressive, or when I start to get anxious and upset. And that only comes from really watching your mind through meditation. But I'm finding I needed a long time to do that, but I'm finding in the warrior training that people are getting it quite quickly, and which is very heartening and a good sign. I don't think anyone can be in a position of influence, leadership, activism without having a spiritual practice that gives you a sense of your minusculeness in this vast cosmos, where you're not the center of everything. And it gives you a grounding for when everything around you is going crazy. You don't have to go crazy because you have control of your mind, and you can see that you're about to go crazy, and you can pull yourself back from that. I don't know how, well, I do know what happens to people who do not have some kind of spiritual practice as I've just defined it, knowing you're not the center of the universe. We actually have a lot of support from other energies in the universe, but also just being able to watch your own stuff and with a commitment that I don't want to be this highly reactive, angry, anxious, fearful person. I want to be of service. And I have to say, because this is a good way to close this, that our internal work here has to be really determining how much we want to serve others versus how much we need. Do we need respect? Do we need fame? Do we need admiration? Do we need appreciation? It all's under the word, we all need love. But what is the basis for our action? Why are you doing what you're doing? And we talk about compassion without ambition. So it's ambition that is so self-focused that is the major roadblock to us truly knowing what to do that would be of service, because there's always a price tag attached to it. I will do this for you, and I will demonstrate that I'm a really good person. No, we don't want that. We just want, I will do this for you right now because I've seen clearly that this is the best action I could dream up. And it's free of ego, it's free of needs. And that takes a lot of practice to attain.
Mm-hmm. That's great. One of the participants wrote in, I had the pleasure of meeting Deb last week at a workshop Peter and I held. And the quote came up from Mother Teresa that we can't do great things. We can only do small things with great love.
Yes, I love that quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she also said, if you judge somebody, you have no time to love them.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, Meg, I just want to thank you so much for doing this and for making such a huge contribution to a group of committed, caring people.
Yes.
And we have recorded this. We will send this out to everyone. And we hope to see you back here for future offerings from teachers like Meg. And I appreciate all that you've brought to me over the years, Meg. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm very grateful we could spend this time together.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.